So, you may have noticed that over the last few months, most TV stations have been airing this new docudrama series from the makers of Chernobyl called Coronavirus Pandemic. And it's bloody addictive TV. I haven't even left the house in months, I've just been sat watching it, it's that gripping. It's kind of like a disaster movie about a deadly virus outbreak, but set in a universe where the world is run by a stupid 10-year-old who didn't pay attention in school. Basically, I don't think it's anything to worry about. It's just a rumour made up by the mean kids who don't like me. The writing is ham-fisted and many plot decisions are really stupid, but I've got to say it does look realistic. I mean, just look at this show. I'm not sure if it's puppetry or if it's really good CGI, but you could almost believe that this is actually real. Its budget must be massive as well. Imagine the deals that major channels must have had to cut to get the rights to have this thing airing on almost every station. And to have every country in the world remaking their own version of it for their own audiences at the exact same time. Honestly, the scale of this television project is just breathtaking. For the uninitiated, let me give you a run-through of some of the major plot developments on the British version. The show's pilot introduced us to a new type of virus called coronavirus that can be fatal, is incredibly infectious, and most people only get mild symptoms and could be carrying it and spreading it and not even notice. If you remember SARS, that thing from the early 2000s, coronavirus is basically a bigger budget sequel to that. The virus originated in Wuhan in China. It got minimal media attention at first because China is on the other side of the world and no one in the West gives a shit about the other side of the world. But then it started showing up everywhere because people were still travelling and no one was taking it seriously. It gets to February and by this point the virus has pretty much swept across the globe. Loads of countries immediately start coming up with policies on how to tackle the virus, and most of them were taking it very seriously and following the World Health Organization's advice. Countries started locking civilians down with strict stay-at-home orders, while the UK adopted the initial policy of spinning around in a circle and crossing their fingers and hoping that the problem would magically fix itself. Naturally, wishing the problem away didn't work. Communication from the government was so piss-bleedingly awful for weeks until one day they realised that this was probably something that they should bother doing something about and stood up and said, okay, now we're actually going to do something to tackle the pandemic. So, what did they decide to do to tackle the pandemic? Well, who the fuck knows? I could barely follow it. The government started out by just telling people to wash your hands a bit more thoroughly than usual, and that was it.
But no matter how much I wash, they never get clean, Boris. Why do they never get clean?
Then they started talking about this idea called herd immunity. The theory was that if everyone gets it, their immune systems will start building an immunity to it, and when they do, they won't spread it anymore, so the infection rate goes down. Which sounded workable to them until someone whispered in their ears that given the mortality rates coming out of other countries, this plan will probably result in the deaths of at least 250,000 people. Also, it usually kills elderly people who are more often than not your voters. Oh fuck, change of plan! So what they then said was, okay everybody, we're not going to lock down, but basically everyone start acting like we're in lockdown even though we're not. We're not going to order anything to shut, you've still got to go to work where you may be exposed to hundreds of people on a daily basis. Work's okay, but we heavily advise against going to the pubs or the cinema afterwards. That's the dangerous bit of your day. So not only will you probably get the virus anyway, you'll also be fucking miserable. Wow, great plan guys. Also, you know that some people actually work at pubs and the cinema for their, jobs? And these people need people to go to them for their income? Wow, this plan clearly had a lot of thought and effort put into it. The argument in favour of basically doing fuck all appeared to be that it will stress people out and make them panic more if you treat the situation with severity, despite the fact that had already been happening for weeks while the government stuck its thumb up its arse and let the story get out of control. As the story started coming out, people started panic buying toilet rolls and other supplies because no one knew what the fuck was going to happen next. Anyway, so shopping during this period was mental. Supermarkets started gradually running out of certain items over the course of several weeks. The toilet rolls were the first to go, then as people realised that they actually need to have food inside of them in order to shit and thereby use said toilet rolls in the first place, that was when the pasta and canned goods started to go. Then it was the fresh fruit and veg. Food got so scarce that you're having to properly hunt in different corner shops and supermarkets for your fruit and veg. Right, so the Co-op had onions, Lidl had cauliflower, and I found an entire basket full of carrots in the Aldi, but I couldn't find any avocados, they're really rare now. It was like everyone had started playing Pokemon with their groceries. Anyway, so after realising that just saying to people, don't do anything fun if you can help it, didn't work, and people were still going to holiday destinations and the pubs, I mean, you'd think that'd be fucking obvious. They had no choice but to go into lockdown and say that you must stay at home. There are only 5 reasons that you're allowed to leave your home now: to go to work if you're an essential worker, to buy food and essential supplies, for a limited 1 hour's worth of exercise per day, to seek medical attention if necessary, or if your name is Dominic Cummings. Although I think they added that last one at a later date, I can't remember. So everyone got locked inside their homes. And then there was a major plot twist for which there had been some foreshadowing in a previous episode.
I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody.
Yeah, no prizes for guessing what happened next.
And he is being now admitted into intensive care with those persistent symptoms of coronavirus.
Yeah, as far as plot twists go, this one was kind of fucking obvious and heavy-handed. Johnson eventually recovered from coronavirus and returned to work, and when he did, he started fucking around with the government messaging, which had admittedly shaped up into something coherent. Stay home, protect the NHS, save lives. Okay, simple effective slogan, makes sense. Don't go out if you can help it, and hospital workers won't get overburdened with coronavirus cases. Right, clear, simple. But for some stupid reason, he then changed the slogan to stay alert, control the virus, save lives. Yeah, vague or what? How is me staying alert supposed to do anything to control the virus? I think that what this means is that I'm supposed to carry an extremely powerful microscope with me everywhere I go and check the hands of everyone I meet for coronavirus particles before I go, okay, you're clean, I can shake your hand now. Anyway, so that's the UK version, an incoherent, rambly mess that makes Lost look like an intricately planned masterpiece. For a look at what was happening in the American remake, happening concurrently on the other side of the Atlantic, longtime friend of the channel, Council of Geeks, has more.
I'd heard of the show before we got our own iteration of it over here. It wasn't something I was sure that it'd be worth following, but I mean, you know how it is with these things. Eventually, it's like the only thing anybody is talking about, and you kind of just get sucked into it. And of course, we got what usually happens when the American version comes out. It is bigger in scale while being severely dumbed down. It's funny in hindsight because it had a pretty quiet rollout here. It's like nobody expected it to even be that big, although it was already exploding in other territories. I mean, some folks clearly knew that this would be a big deal, but that wasn't the folks in charge. I think those people had just planned on it to be a mini-series at first, and everybody was pretty upfront that they expected to have the story wrapped up by April. But then, wow, did this thing ever blow up. But you can really tell they hadn't planned for that, because the story, it turns into this whole thing where they just keep repeatedly breaking the narrative in order to make the thing last longer. It's like 3/4 of the cast have to act like complete and total morons just to extend the storyline, because even if half of them had been competent, they would not have been able to justify stretching this out indefinitely. There are actually a couple of good original characters in the mix. I mean, there's the fan favorite, Dr. Fauci. Pretty clear at this point that he's the closest thing to a main hero that the American version have. And look, I won't lie, guy's a really compelling character. He's smart, he's determined, but he's also very human. He's surprisingly relatable. But then, to my earlier point, the writers decided that just trying to beat back the tide of infection against an extremely contagious pathogen that lies dormant for 2 weeks, even as it spreads across a society never designed to deal with anything like this, somehow wasn't enough. So instead, they decided to complicate things by having him answer to a boss who, I'm sorry, is so cartoonishly inane that it breaks the reality of the entire thing. The show, first of all, it didn't even need a human villain. That was just completely unnecessary. But if you're going to do one, why would anybody create a character that nobody could ever reasonably believe could reach and hold on to that level of power? I mean, this goes way, way beyond any reasonable suspension of disbelief. I mean, it was clear how sloppy the writing was well before this guy completely took over the narrative. But like, so so many people. I had opted to try and tune into this show and, follow it as best I could. But like so many people, I pretty much checked out after the guy suggested injecting disinfectant. Once that happened, I'm like, I just can't anymore. They're asking me to accept too much. I'll take up gardening or something to pass the time rather than watching this. It's got the kind of writing you'd expect from the 13th year of a sitcom run by a creative team deliberately trying to get fired. And it hasn't even finished its first season yet. Look, I'll admit I haven't really followed the UK version as closely, but I just hope they show more restraint than what we got over here.
So, anyone up for a day at the beach? So yeah, the lockdown rules have started to get relaxed now, and apparently this thing's just going to dribble out over the course of the next few months. What a relief. That was scary. Thank God it's over though. I did such a great job in tackling it. Wait, no you didn't. You spent all of February dithering and delaying your response to it, and it's been a fucking travesty. Well, it looks like that's all we have time for, folks. No, you've still got serious questions to answer? This whole thing has been one glorious triumph. Hooray for Britain! No, it hasn't. We've had one of the worst outbreaks in the entire world. Thousands of people have died. How the hell is this a success to you? Many thanks to all our key workers for your dedication throughout this crisis that is definitely over now. The end. Where are these credits coming from? How do I stop this? Thanks for watching, everybody. This is definitely the end of the story. Move on, nothing to see here. Bye!